Welcome to the Nobel Prize Museum here in Stockholm. It's Peace Friday. In just 10 minutes, we will hear the news from Oslo and hear who this year's Peace Prize laureate will be. Alfred Nobel, in his will, declared that all his money, or almost all of his money, should be used to form 5 yearly prizes, one of those being the Peace Prize. Since 1901, we've had names like Martin Luther King, Malala Yousafzai, Dag Hammarskjöld, who have become Nobel Peace Prize laureates. Today, we're here to find out who will become this year's Peace Prize laureate. In 10 minutes, we will know. Special welcome to the students from Folk, Universitetet in Uppsala. I've heard that you've prepared some really interesting questions. Looking forward to hear those in just a bit. Welcome also to those of you following us online. You can also submit your questions using the Menti code provided. And here to answer all our questions, we've invited our own Nobel Prize guru or sage, Gustav Källstrand. Welcome, Gustav.
Thank you.
Do you go to pub quizzes?
Sorry?
Do you go to pub quizzes?
Well, occasionally, yes.
If there was one on the background of the Nobel Prize, is there anyone on this planet who could compete with you?
Yeah, probably. I was on a Swedish game show with other Nobel experts.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, a few years ago, and I won then.
There you go. So,
but the problem is, I know a lot most of the year about the Nobel Prize, except this week when everyone wants to know everything about the Nobel Prize. This is the only week where I know nothing because all the prizes are new. So, rest of the year I know a lot, but now it's...
Fair enough. It's been a busy week. We've had prizes in the sciences, yesterday literature. Any prize that stands out to you? Anything that's particularly interesting?
Well, I think the medicine prize was really interesting with discovering old extinct humans and mapping their genomes. It was really fascinating.
Medicine prize. Went to Sweden, right?
Yes.
Yep. So today, let's turn to the Peace Prize. We know that Alfred Nobel invented the dynamite used in military purposes. Not really a symbol for peace, is it? Was the Peace Prize his way of compensating?
Well, actually, dynamite wasn't really used for war, but he also discovered, because that was an industrial tool, but he also discovered the smokeless gunpowder, which is really used for war. We don't think that it was because he had a bad conscience. It was, he actually thought that making more powerful weapons could be a better way to create peace, because with powerful enough weapons, people wouldn't want to, or it would be irrational to have war.
That's what we call terror balance, right?
Yeah, deterrence and terror balance. But he was constantly being asked to maybe change his mind, and apparently he did, because in his will, of course, he wrote that one of the criteria for the Peace Prize is disarmament. So he probably changed his mind. But we don't think he had a bad conscience. But when the prize was new, in 1896, when he died, the thing that created the most interest for this prize was that the inventor of weapons had created a peace prize. So it was a controversial.
I see. So back to his will. All the other prizes are awarded here in Stockholm. He stated that the Peace Prize should be awarded by a Norwegian committee in Oslo. Why did he want to involve the Norwegians?
Well, at this time, Sweden and Norway was in a union, so we weren't the same country, but we had the same king. But we had 2 different parliaments, and we don't know exactly why he chose, well, none of the prize-awarding institutions. But there was, the Swedish parliament was very much involved in the European peace movement at the time. And lots of politicians in the parliament were outspoken peace, well, maybe not activists, but at least had this, held these ideals of collaboration and negotiation high. So I think he just thought that they would do a better job.
Were they a more peaceful people?
Yeah, and there was actually one more thing, which is today it's a bit controversial, because the Peace Prize is, of course, an independent prize. It's not part of the Norwegian government, even though the members are selected by the Norwegian parliament. But it's not an official Norwegian policy. This can be a bit controversial if the prize goes to someone, well, that the government wants to, prize to criticize someone the government wants to collaborate with or something.
Is it fair to say that the Peace Prize is the most controversial prize?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why Nobel might have chosen Norway is that at the time, since we were in a union, the Norwegians had no foreign policy, so they would be even more neutral. But yeah, it's definitely the most...
But then they became independent.
Yeah, exactly, in 1905, so it's backfired. And then they immediately gave the prize to Theodore Roosevelt, the American president, because they had sort of a fishing dispute with the US at the time. So maybe.
And then Roosevelt went on to wage war, right?
Well, he waged war all the time.
Right.
Yeah, but he got the prize for negotiating peace between Russia and Japan, which was one of the first where they used really an international framework for creating peace. Okay. And that's been one of the really important part of the Norwegian or the Peace Prize's outlook on the world, the fact that institutions and collaboration can create a stable world and not rather than having war.
Okay, we're running a bit short on time here. I think the live streaming will start in just a minute from Oslo. And just mentioning the top candidate, according to the bookmakers this year, people have been talking about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That's one of the names. We've also heard Svitlana. Let's see if I can get her name right. It's Zhikovskaya, oppositional politician from Belarus, and a few other names, organizations. Can you tell us what are we looking at right now?
Well, this is the Norwegian. It's called the Norwegian Nobel Institute. Nobel Institute, the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Work at the Nobel Institute in Oslo. So you see Alfred Nobel at the right in the picture. Behind that door, the chairman of the committee is standing, Berit Reiss-Andersen, together with the secretary, and there are, well, they should be standing there at least, and they should be opening the door any minute. But they have, this is where they work, and they have the 5 people who have worked for a year, getting in all the nominations, and now they've evaluated the candidates, and there they are standing, having a little chat with each other, deciding, so they've decided, and now they're going to present it.
They want to keep us waiting just a few more seconds.
Yeah. Oh, great. And we also have updated our computer, apparently.
Taking a pause, updating the software, back to Oslo.
Good morning, everyone. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2022 to 1 individual and 2 organizations. The Peace Prize laureates represent civil society in their home countries. They have for many years promoted the right to criticize power and protect the fundamental rights of citizens. They have made an outstanding effort to document war crimes, human rights abuses, and the abuse of power. Together, they demonstrate the significance of civil society for peace and democracy. This year's Peace Prize is awarded to human rights advocate Ales Bialyatsky from Belarus, the Russian human rights organization Memorial, and the Ukrainian human rights organization Center for Civil Liberties. Ales Bialyatsky was one of the initiators of the democracy movement that emerged in Belarus in the mid-1980s. He has devoted his life to promoting democracy and peaceful development in his home country. He founded the organization Vyasna, meaning spring, in 1996 in response to the controversial constitutional amendments that gave the president dictatorial powers and triggered widespread demonstrations. Viasna provided support for the jailed demonstrators and their families. In the years that followed, Viasna evolved into a broad-based human rights organization that documented and protested against the authorities' use of torture against political prisoners. Government authorities have repeatedly sought to silence Ales Bialiatski. He was imprisoned from 2011 to 2014. Following large-scale demonstrations against the regime in 2020, he was again arrested. He is still detained without trial. Despite tremendous personal hardship, Mr. Bialiatski has not yielded 1 inch in his fight for human rights and democracy in Belarus. The human rights organization Memorial was established in 1987 by human rights activists in the former Soviet Union who wanted to ensure that the victims of the communist regime's oppression would never be forgotten. Nobel Prize laureate Andrei Sakharov and human rights activist Svetlana Ganushkina were among the founders. Memorial is based on the notion that confronting past crimes is essential in preventing new ones. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Memorial grew to become the largest human rights organization in Russia. In addition to establishing a center of documentation on the victims of the Stalinist era, Memorial compiled and systematized information on political oppression and human rights violations in Russia. Memorial became the most authoritative source of information on political prisoners in Russian detention facilities. The organization has also been standing at the forefront of efforts to combat militarism and promote human rights and government based on rule of law. When civil society must give way to autocracy and dictatorship, peace is often the next victim. During the Chechen wars, Memorial gathered and verified information on abuses and war crimes perpetrated on the civilian population by Russian and pro-Russian forces. In 2009, the head of Memorial's branch in Chechnya, Natalia Estemirova, was killed because of this work. Civil society actors in Russia have been subjected to threats, imprisonment, disappearances, and murder for many years. As part of the government's harassment of Memorial, the organization was stamped early on as a foreign agent. In December 2021, the authorities decided that Memorial was to be forcibly liquidated and the documentation center was to be closed permanently. The closure became effective in the following months, but the people behind Memorial refused to shut down. In a comment, Chairman of the board, Jan Rashinsky, stated, "Nobody plans to give up." The Center for Civil Liberties was founded in Kiev in 2007 for the purpose of advancing human rights and democracy in Ukraine. The center has taken a stand to strengthen Ukrainian civil society and pressure the authorities to make Ukraine a full-fledged democracy. To develop Ukraine into a state governed by rule of law, Center for Civil Liberties has actively advocated that Ukraine become affiliated with the International Criminal Court. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Center for Civil Liberties has engaged in efforts to identify and document Russian war crimes against the Ukrainian civilian population. In collaboration with international partners, the Center is playing a pioneering role with a view to holding the guilty parties accountable for their crimes. By awarding the Nobel Peace Prize for 2022 to Ales Bialyatsky Memorial and the Center for Civil Liberties, the Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to honor 3 outstanding champions of human rights, democracy, and peaceful coexistence in the neighbor countries Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. Through their consistent efforts in favor of human values, anti-militarism, and principles of law, this year's laureates have revitalized and honored Alfred Nobel's vision of peace and fraternity between nations, a vision most needed in the world today. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair of the Committee, was it...
Can I get the sound on? Yes. So, Gustav, we had 1 individual, 2 organizations. Ales Bialyatsky from Belarus, frontrunner for the democracy movement in Belarus, currently detained. I was reading tax evasion, that's the allegedly. That's what they're detaining him for in Belarus. 2 organizations, 1 Ukrainian, 1 Russian. The Ukrainian one is called
Center for Civil Liberties.
Center for Civil Liberties, a human rights movement, and a Russian human rights movement called Memorial. Reflections. Difficult task, but what are your reflections?
Yeah, I think it's well, I have one being sort of interested in the prize. It's very unusual that 2 organizations share the prize, but having said that, I think it's my spontaneous reaction is that this is a really very good prize. This is one of those prizes where the committee really shows what the Nobel Prize, the power of the prize, how they can use the power of the prize in a good way. And they also clearly show that there are alternatives that people not always think about, in the sense that, you know, everyone speculated that Zelensky would get the prize because his country has been attacked. But of course, I mean, war is not the aim of the Peace Prize. The Peace Committee wants to find, as they very clearly said at the end of her talk, Andersen said that they are honoring the people working for a peaceful coexistence between the people of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine.
So it is a prize not directly linked, but it's in one way about the ongoing conflict, or you could.
Yeah, clearly, and obviously it's about that, but it's showing that the way forward isn't just. I mean, obviously there has to be peace eventually, but you build peace not necessarily just by sort of winning a war or ending a war even, but you build peace by creating these kinds of collaborations, people that can, again, work together and obviously also fight for democracy in countries. So I think it's very well. It's a prize where the Nobel Committee really shows what they stand for, and values that maybe a few years ago, when you would say that, well, the Peace Prize stands for something like, human rights and peaceful coexistence, it would seem maybe a bit bland, and everyone loves that. But apparently, what we see now is this is actually a very important political statement, and I think so. I think this is, I think it will be a very powerful prize.
So if we stay with Alexander or Ales Bialitsky, Belarusian democracy forerunner, Belarusian peace prizes. Do you know?
No, there's been a Belarusian literature prize, but no peace prizes. But again, it's difficult. But he's, as far as I also understand, he's still in prison now. He's been in prison several times, but he was last summer. He became arrested last time. So whether if he's in prison, he won't come to Oslo to accept his prize. This, of course, reminds us of prizes like Liu Xiaobo a few years ago, the Chinese dissident who died in prison eventually. Right. But also goes back to prizes to Karl von Ossietzky in 1936 for opposing the Nazi regime in Germany. So people have been, dissidents who have been in prison. That's common in the history.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about how the Peace Prize sometimes can be controversial prize. Was this would you call this a safe card or a safe play by the Nobel Committee in Oslo, or will this be a controversial prize?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I can't imagine Putin saying that, congratulating Memorial for their work. So controversial there, but I think it's. I think it would be really interesting to see what people think, whether it's controversial or not. Also, I don't know enough about these organizations to. One thing is that the Center for Civil Liberties now they're apparently, obviously, recording war crimes in Ukraine. But since 2007, they fought for democracy in Ukraine, which, of course, is a reminder that Ukraine hasn't always been the best democratic country. Right. So that might be controversial. But I think it's awarding three recipients from these three countries. I mean, that's I think it's a bold statement. Yeah, and I think it's a bold statement, but really what the Nobel Peace Prize is all about and should be all about. That it's actually, I mean, it's not the people of Russia that's waging war on Ukraine. It's at least not all the people. And there are forces in Russia and in Belarus who are opposing this. So I think that's really, really important. And highlighting that will probably be a bit controversial, but also very appreciated. I did read also, while the prize was announced, that Ales Bialitsky, he's not a stranger to Sweden. Last year, or 2 years ago, he was awarded the Right Livelihood Award. Okay. Sometimes referred to as the alternative Nobel Peace Prize. Also Per Anger-priset in 2006. And you also mentioned that you were a bit surprised that there were two organizations sharing the prize. How unusual is that? Do you have any examples? Well, I can't remember any time there were two organizations shared. There might be, because when you say there's none, usually maybe you're wrong. But I'm quite sure it hasn't happened before. But while we're at it, we didn't have time to cover this earlier. But organizations, if I've counted correctly, these are the number 29 and 30. Perhaps there might be one or two. 30 organizations being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This is unique to the Peace Prize, right? Are there any organizations? Yeah, the Peace Prize is the only prize that awards organizations as well as individuals. The other ones don't. Fair enough. So, yeah. Fair enough. Okay, and anything else to add before we invite the audience for some questions? No, let's ask. Let's ask the students. We would love to hear your questions. Anyone who would like to contribute with a question?
please raise your hand.
Or a comment.
Or, yeah.
What do you think? Do you think it was a good prize?
People
Some of you are nodding,
yeah.
that's good.
Maybe we'll have some questions coming in a minute. We'll come back to you in a second. Have there been any questions coming in online? Stephanie?
Yes, we have a few questions. I can start with one. This seems like a rather political statement. Do you agree? And can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, it's definitely a political statement. Well, everything that we've talked about so far is about how political it is. And I think it's important to remember that the Peace Prize is a political prize. The other prizes are awarded by experts, physics prize by physicists, professors and scientists. This is not a prize awarded by historians or political scientists. This is a prize awarded by politicians. So, and we said earlier that this is the Peace Prize is the most controversial of the different prizes. That's because that's an active choice. The physics prize, again, for example, they have a theory, someone else has a theory, and then you have an experiment that shows the theory is correct, and then you wait 10, 20 years to make sure that it's really correct, and then you get the prize. So it's 50 years sometimes, or 30 years. Because you have to make sure it's correct. The Peace Prize is not like that. You don't wait. I mean, then you would get a prize for someone maybe doing something good in you during this war in 30 years. That would be too late. The Peace Prize is a political prize, and they want to be up to date. So they give prizes to people who have obviously accomplished things and done things. So they are. It's not sort of given in advance, but it's given to an ongoing conflict to make a political statement. And I guess the statement here is, of course, like I mentioned, I think the statement is that civil society in these countries have a big, well, responsibility maybe, but also opportunity. And this is the road to peace to support civil society in countries. Sometimes the statement can also be that negotiation and international collaboration is better than well, better than war. So they have statements that they want to make, and they also very often refer to the prize as a resource, not just for themselves to promote sort of this kind of worldview, but that the worldview of Alfred Nobel and the committee, but also for the recipients. Because when you get the Nobel Peace Prize, more people will listen to what you have to say. It can sometimes offer protection. It's harder to, I mean, pressure on Belarus to release Bielyatsky from prison if he's still in prison, which we think, but I don't think we're quite sure. If it's the pressure to release him the international pressure will go up now because he has the Peace Prize. And I think also these organizations. And if I can just add one thing when it comes to individuals and organizations,
sure.
Since we talked about that. For the prize, it's often very good to have an individual to get the prize, because that's someone we can relate to and it's a more powerful symbol. But very often the prize for the recipients, it really makes more of a difference for the organizations. The organizations, of course, live longer, they can live on presumably indefinitely, but very many of these organizations are small, and don't get that much attention, but having a prize really helps their work. So organizations are really helped by the prize. So I think it's a good thing that the Peace Prize can go to both organizations and individuals.
Okay.
But definitely a political prize.
A follow-up question here.
Yeah.
So 10th of December, they're being invited here. Ales Bialecki, if he isn't in prison then. Who will represent the organizations?
Well, it's up to them to decide, and they will come to Oslo. Not they will come
right.
here, but yeah. No, it's usually. I mean, they assume they have like a chairman or something like that. Yeah. But when the organization ICANN, also a small organization, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, they received the prize in 2017, and then they have their chairperson Beatrice Fien, who was there to accept the award, but they also brought I can't remember her name, but one of the victims of the Hiroshima bombing to the prize ceremony. So sometimes this can be someone from the organization, but they can also bring if it's a cause they work with, but some people who are involved or afflicted by this. So I assume that there will be some official representatives, but the guest list will probably include people who have maybe been in prison or maybe suffered under these regimes.
Yep, thank you. Were there any more questions coming in from online?
We do have other questions. Another one goes, are there any other prizes that's gone to organizations or people involved in an ongoing conflict?
Yeah, very good question. And I mentioned the prize that this reminds us of is Carl von Ossietzky, who got the prize in 1936. That was before the Second World War. But that prize in 1936 was the first time when the Nobel Peace Prize gave the prize to something that was still going on. Before that, for the first 30 years, they tried to give it to organizations just for sort of existing. It was a good thing in itself that there was some of these humanitarian organizations. But from the 30s on, they realized that this became much more controversial, of course, to give something to a dissident within a country and not to a resolved conflict where there was peace.
And Ossietzky was imprisoned.
Yeah, he was imprisoned
at the time.
Yeah, and later died before. So
like Bielitsky today.
Exactly. And there has been actually, I mean, there has been other prizes where it's an ongoing conflict. They can't wait until there's peace. There has been, of course, prizes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for peace resolutions that didn't work out. So the conflicts went on even after the prize.
That was Yasser Arafat.
And Shimon Peres.
And another person, right?
Yitzhak Rabin, yeah. Okay. So there has been like that. But this is still a good question. I have to think a bit. But this thing here is, of course, that there's a war that's going on where there's no solution in sight. However, we have to remember that they didn't mention they mentioned the Russian war crimes, but that was part of the work on civil liberties. It's not. Well, of course, it's an anti-war prize, but it's not. I mean, it's obvious that it's motivated by the war. But it's not for stopping the war.
If we look at Malala Yousafzai, the youngest recipient, not an ongoing conflict perhaps, but very much an ongoing problem. She fought for girls or children's right to schooling in Pakistan.
Yeah.
17 years of age, youngest recipient. Yeah. I know a few things as well. But what about? Would you say that was an ongoing conflict in the same sense?
Well, it's an ongoing problem, at least. Like you said, she shared the prize with Kailash Satyarthi, who worked with child labor again. So yeah, but that goes well with what you asked before about this. That the prize, they don't wait until something is over. They have to, in order to be up to date, they have to sort of. So yeah, they.
And that's unique among the Nobel prizes.
Yeah, they actually and they. When they've sort of not done it this way, those have been some of the most criticized prize. For example, the prize to EU in 2012. That was really a postponed prize. That was a prize where they really motivated this, not by so much but what the EU was doing at the time. It was very criticized because at the time what the EU was everyone thought about was closing its borders to refugees, but what EU had done keeping Europe out of war since 1945. But that was sort of a really long-term prize, very criticized. So they have tried to be more up-to-date. And of course, sometimes they have a prize, they give someone a prize, and then it doesn't work out. The war goes on, but sometimes it does work out, and it's... I think if you don't take those, I think they are aware of this, and if you don't take those risks, you won't get the Peace Prize with this status.
Fair enough. Let's check in with the students again. Any questions coming in from the students?
You don't have to sort of look away from us. We won't force you.
We won't give you a grade.
No, we won't give you grades.
Won't be assessed. No, it's okay. Any more questions coming in from online, Stephanie? We have time for one more.
Okay. so we can take a final question. How do you think this prize will change the security for the laureates?
Yeah, as I said, I would assume that the hope is that this would improve the security of the laureates, especially with Bieletsky, that he would maybe again pressure to release him from prison. But just to contradict myself, Shirin Ebadi, who won the prize, she was a civil liberties advocate in Iran. She received the prize, and well, while she was glad to get it, she has said afterwards that her work became almost impossible after the prize because she worked with individuals. She helped women and children get to court and get justice, and this was work that was better done when it sort of was a bit kept a bit quiet because it made it easier for people to come forward and speak up. All the attention made it possible, and she get more criticism from the government and the regime. So she actually had to leave Iran. She still lives in UK, I think. But hopefully for the better for these institutions, organizations, especially Memorial. That seems like an organization that would benefit immensely from something like this. But of course, it's already been. Well, it can't be any worse. Like I understand, it's already been outlawed, so it's what could be worse. But I mean, maybe if it's a very strict regime, which Russia seems to be right now, maybe they will strike down harder because of it.
So the consequences, we'll find out.
Yeah, good way.
Thank you, Gustav. It's time to round up. Thank you, the students from Folkuniversitetet in Uppsala. Thank you, those of us joining us online. It's been a pleasure. Join us again on Monday as we're here to discuss the Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.